Welcome to another episode of Roll or Die. We have had a lot of big names on the show before. I don't know how we haven't had this guy until now, because he definitely is a very big name in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Australia. He recently won the AJP Oceania BJJ Player of the Year. He is a coach at GARRA Jiu-Jitsu, and he is Anton Minenko. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. How great is it? Most importantly, to have the name Anton. Like I straight off the bat, man. What a privilege that is, hey?
Exactly.
We're outnumbered here.
From, I don't know. Where do you originate from?
I actually grew up in South Australia originally. So my mum, I grew up with my mum in South Australia. So yeah, I don't know about as a kid. Actually, they moved a little bit. I think we started in South Australia in Adelaide, and then they moved to Orange, New South Wales for a little bit, and then my mum went back to Adelaide, and up until probably 16, I was living in Adelaide. Yeah.
Awesome, man.
And did you start jiu-jitsu there in Adelaide, or
yeah,
because you're in Queensland now? Yeah,
that's correct. So I actually started there when I was about 14, when there was they didn't have any kids classes yet or anything like that. It was only maybe 2 or 3 different gyms in South Australia with a guy called Gustavo Toledo at a gym called Brazilian Top Team or Australian Top Team. Like I started there when I was 14. I was fairly big already. I was probably about 80 kilos, I think. So it wasn't too crazy in terms of like being able to participate and everything. But yeah, it definitely it wasn't like established as it is now, with like a bunch of different gyms and stuff like that, where they've got kids classes, they've got women's classes, and it's like all established. It was pretty much like a bunch of dudes that all wanted to be like martial artists or were fighting MMA or something like that, and they just would get in the shed and roll, a couple of times a week. So
yeah.
So what attracted you? What attracted you to that? Like, because you were only young, right? So like, what?
Yeah, I was playing rugby, and I always played rugby up until probably maybe 5-6 years ago. My uncle also did some like kung fu martial arts, and he would watch, he'd watch Foxtel and stuff, and he'd see some things of The Ultimate Fighter, and he's like, man, you should try this out. So I was like, I don't know. And they're like, no, you should do it. It'll be good for your rugby or whatever. I think that was the angle they used. So I'm like, all right. And I just went there and tried it out. And then I kept doing it. I was playing like just below professional level here in Brisbane, Prem grade rugby. Even as I was playing here, I was still training and teaching and stuff as well. So I kept doing it. Yeah.
Wow. Was that hard on the body? Like you mentioned that you were a bigger kid. I guess you compete in the heavyweight division, but did you get like banged up a bit doing that much training, or how'd you go?
Yeah, no, I've had a heap of injuries. Heaps of surgeries. I think I probably have had I think playing rugby though in general is going to lead to a lot more injury than jiu-jitsu, just because of like the collision and the nature of the sport itself. Like 15 over 100 kilo dudes running into each other for an hour and 20 minutes. Eventually something's going to explode. So, and I've had a bunch of injuries and a bunch of surgeries. I think probably I've had a lot more surgeries than most of the guys I competed with. There's a lot of knee and ankle injuries and a lot of surgeries and restarting and training again and rehabbing and lifting.
What impact does that have? I've never had a surgery on an injury, so that's in the future for me.
I have.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to know, maybe from both of you then, what does that do for adjusting for the future? Like, do you get scared now? Is like, I don't want another knee injury, so I'm going to play differently. Does it alter your game?
I think for some people it might. Like, I don't like. I try not to like have anticipation for anything. Like, it's difficult for you to kind of like, if you like operate in fear or whatever, it's hard for you to kind of like achieve anything. So I think this is me personally. I never really had it as like a setback or held me back to do anything. Actually, I think you do get probably a little bit more intelligent. I think as I was like younger and just explosive and powerful and whatever, I'd just like, it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna do whatever I want to do. So I think you get a little bit more intelligent with understanding your body and like physically how you can do things in a way that's more effective, rather than like being worried about getting injured again. I don't know. I never really thought about it, honestly. Like, I just do what I had to do. All right, I'm injured now. I'll go do rehab, get strong again, and then try my best to be competitive again. So
that's cool.
You are a bigger guy, Anton. Can I ask, you compete around 100 kilos? Is that right?
Yeah.
I'd be remiss. My partner's also a bigger guy, and he told me that I need to ask this question about, I need to ask you around like training with smaller people, because I guess for you as well, the majority of people on the mat are going to be smaller than you. Have you got any tips like how to do that as a bigger person?
Like, obviously, this is a common question for a lot of people because they struggle with like kind of wanting to win all the time. Like, it's easy for you to win using strength. Like, there's no challenge to you. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's like just a poor attitude to put into like, when you train in general, you shouldn't be there to win. Like, you should be there to improve and acquire skills. And I think this is like a common problem that people fall into in any weight category. And when they first start doing jiu-jitsu, like, it's one of like the most common pitfalls is like people go there to win or they go there to do well. And it's like, the only thing you should be doing that in is a competition. When you're training, the purpose of training is to acquire skills, to improve. So you going there and beating people with stuff that you had when you came in the door, which is strength and power and explosion, doesn't really add anything, doesn't benefit you in any way. So I think the more people think about stuff that way, then the less they get into that kind of ego battle in the gym where they're just trying to beat everyone or win all the time. So, but in terms of being a bigger guy, like, you can kind of force yourself into scenarios that might be less common for you, like being on the bottom. Go on the bottom and play guard more consistently. That way you can't use like the attributes you have naturally to kind of, do better with everyone.
Cool. As far as competing, like, obviously you've had quite a lot of success in that realm. What do you think is the number one contributor to success in competing for you?
I think that's a hard question to answer. Like, I think there's a bunch of factors that go into like being a good competitor. I think honestly, one of the things that helped me so much with being competitive is the rugby stuff. Already being like quite a high level competitive athlete, just especially like the reactive stuff, like reaction and stress under pressure. I think for me, it was easy to transition into competitive jiu-jitsu because I was already competitive at a high level of something else. And probably something that was even more reactive than jiu-jitsu, like running at top speed, like into another person, and someone's throwing you a ball and you have to like catch it within another second and decide whether you're going to step this way or that way or bury your shoulder or bump the guy or whatever. So I think something that really helped me with being competitive in general is just being really like prepared for like certain level of stress and understanding how like anxiety kind of works. And then also just being able to react under that pressure, like, fairly well already.
Wow.
I think they're two things that really helped me a lot.
Man, could you talk a bit more about that like understanding how anxiety works? Because I think that's an important thing to dig a bit deeper on.
Yeah, so like we always used to do like sports psychology sessions and get like professionals to come in and do all this type of stuff. And probably the thing that stuck with me the most was just explaining that, like, regardless of what you're doing, you're going to experience like emotional reactions to stuff. And generally, like, if you're doing, competitive sports or anything that's meaningful to you is going to create a fairly large like emotional response within your body. But understanding that, like, just because you're having this emotional response, it doesn't mean that it should change like physically how you're able to perform. And like just teaching people how to be aware of like their experience so that they become more kind of comfortable with the emotion. Like, some people completely change how they operate based on something they feel, but it's not technically anything real. It's just that emotional experience, is a momentary experience within your body. I'm talking more real in terms of the physical. Of course, the experience is real. You feel that, but there's no physical change. Nothing's changed. You're just feeling something. So, the main thing that we kind of got taught was like understanding that you're going to experience that, And because, by understanding that you're going to feel that because it's important to you, you're acknowledging, you know, whatever emotion you're experiencing. And by acknowledging that, what happens is you start to become more comfortable with it, and you learn how to operate within that experience without as much change in what you're able to do physically.
I love that.
Awesome. And some people also like they have to come up with different strategies to do that. Some people have a particular routine, or they listen to a particular music or whatever. But yeah, just kind of understanding your mind a little bit to have a good physical result as well.
Awesome.
That being said, Anton, do you have a sort of a routine, or what's your typical, like you've competed a lot, yeah, especially at very high levels. What's a typical comp day look like for you?
Like I don't have I guess I have like a specific routine. Like I don't know, I just turn up there. I try not to get there too early. I try to get there like within a reasonable amount of time, maybe like 1 hour or something like that. I don't like sitting there for hours and hours and hours before. Sometimes that's difficult, especially if you travel, you know, interstate or overseas or whatever, and you know maybe there's someone else competing there as well that you need to go and support or something like that. Jiu-Jitsu tournaments are kind of notorious for like these full weekend events or full day events. So a lot of the times you are there for, you know, 8 hours a day or something like that. So it can be difficult for a lot of people. But ideally, I think you should spend a little bit less time there in the room, in that space, just because it's just full of so much like anxious energy and intensity. And it doesn't matter who you are, it's physically draining interacting with that kind of it's like environment. So I reckon you should get there, you know, maybe 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours before your set time to compete. Probably like I've done, you know, I've learned this stuff over a long time, but there's been times where I didn't warm up for competitions and didn't go there, and then you're gassed in the first fight and stuff like that. So I think like increasing your heart rate, even though I started to do this as I got more experience, I'd go and do like a run and have like quite a big adrenaline dump early in the morning, and then I would go there 1 hour before, warm up a little bit, and I wouldn't have the same kind of issue with like anxiety, adrenaline dump, having these problems like physically from like warming up earlier in the day and that type of thing. But yeah, that's I just have like
sometimes there's no warm-up mats.
Some
of the comps. So yeah, that's good advice. Sorry, go on.
So, but yeah, and then I have like a particular kind of breathing thing that I do just to kind of like increase my heart rate and get prepared for action kind of thing. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I don't really listen to too much music. Some people have their favorite song or their pump up song or whatever, but I try to make it as like natural as possible. It's the same stuff you do in the gym, you just a different arena.
What do you take away from like what does a day in the life of a rugby competitor kind of look like in comparison to, you know, like as far as comp day or match day and match day? Is there things that crossed over there for you that you utilize?
Or is it different because it's a team sport?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a difference between like individual sports and team sports. Even team sports, there is a level of team element, like people are helping you and you're helping them and that type of thing. So there is a level of team element. I think the difference between individual sports and like it could be how professional it's run as well. Like I think as you get like to higher levels of team sports, there's a lot of money involved, so it is quite professional and everything's like structured and catered for you. And this is something that I actually found difficult transitioning into something where there is no structure at all, and there is no strength and conditioning coach. You need to go and do it yourself. There is no strength and conditioning coach that's running a warm up, or there is no physio that's going to be giving you a massage and strapping your knee and all that type of stuff. So I think jiu-jitsu is difficult in terms of kind of emulating that kind of professionalism because it's an individual scenario. And I think most jiu-jitsu athletes don't actually have that. And where everyone's just kind of like bro sciencing their way through everything. And it's like, whether it's cutting weight or weightlifting, whatever, but there's not like a professional setup where someone's running everything for you. So I would say that that's probably one of the major things missing. And I always found that like I was physically stronger than a lot of the guys that I competed with, even of the same weight. And noticing now is because like I came from like a professional strength and conditioning background with my footy stuff. And then the guys that are competing playing rugby, they might be lifting weights, but it's not at the same standard or level to like, 10 years of strength and conditioning with a rugby program or something like that. So, yeah, I think there's a big difference in like how professional everything's run from like everything in the rugby kind of realm is completely organized. Like there is no guesswork that you turn up at this time, they're running a certain warm up, you warm up for this period of time, you go back in the shed, you do this speech about, game plan or strategy, you go into the first half. In the first half, this like it's way more militant, way more regime.
And what's the typical week look like for you, Anton, in terms of training? Like, how do you split it up? Do you still do strength and conditioning? How many times a week? Mobility?
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's like everybody. It's hard to find like a perfect balance with anything you do, but that's always the goal, and you're working hard to achieve that. I've had a bunch of injuries because of not being focusing on recovery enough, and I probably still don't focus on recovery enough. I like to do active stuff, but you also have to be focusing on the recovery stuff, otherwise injuries start to happen. But the normal week for me is I teach full time, so I teach I do other work as well, but my main work is teaching and competing in jiu-jitsu. So I teach probably, I don't know, 5 to 6 classes a day normally. And that might be from, 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. in the morning, the starting time, in between there somewhere. Sometimes I have private, sometimes whatever. And then I'll teach all the way until 8 p.m. at night. And obviously I have like a break in between to go and eat lunch and things like that. That's mostly every day from Monday to Friday. And then I do have some times off on Thursdays normally. I don't have to do much coaching, but I'll go and do something else, or I'll go and train wrestling at like a PCYC or a local wrestling kind of thing. And then I'll lift 3 to 4 times a week as well. When I was before, earlier in the year, I wasn't really doing anything with an actual strength and conditioning coach. I was just lifting on my own, but I was kind of lacking a little bit in terms of cardio and that type of stuff as I stopped playing footy. So I've added like a strength and conditioning coach that I do some more like heart rate based training. So really focusing on cardio and that type of thing through weightlifting, so functional training, that I'll do a couple of times a week before competition. So maybe 5-6 weeks before competitions, I'll add that and that type of thing. Yeah. And I also teach on Saturday mornings, and then I got Sunday and Saturday afternoon off. Yeah.
Amazing.
What you were saying earlier, Anton, about like getting, when you compete, on the times you compete, you try and get there only like an hour or 2 hours prior. But if you're coaching, how does that look like?
Yeah, it's
because then you have to also look after your students, or how's that go?
Yeah, so it depends on the competition. I won't go and compete in every local competition. A lot of the time when I am competing, I'm traveling as well. So it makes it a little bit easier because there's generally not as many students or no students at all internationally, that type of thing. So it doesn't really have a big effect.
Yeah.
But locally,
okay, so for the local ones, you don't tend to compete, so you can focus on coaching. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, sometimes. Like I'll sometimes still compete even if I'm coaching, and it is more difficult because again, your focus is taken away from your job, and your job is to go and compete and do your best job in a competitive realm, which you're taking your focus away from that by going and stressing and being there for 6 hours before or whatever. But generally, also the level's a little bit different, and as you go more international, the level starts to increase in intensity and skill. So I think I'm able to manage just because the level's not as strong. But obviously if I went to like an international competition or even interstate competition and I spent the entire day doing that, it is going to have an effect on the result probably. So you just have to be careful, but that's your job. You've got to go there, you've got to help other people too. So
how do you think Australian Jiu-Jitsu compares on a world level? Like, you have competed internationally quite a bit. Like, are we still a little bit behind, or?
I don't think the level's behind. I think it's just the depth of athletes. So like this is the same thing that you can compare to anything. There is always going to be good guys. Like there might be 1 or 2 guys in Adelaide. There's going to be 3 or 4 guys in Melbourne, 3 or 4 guys in Sydney, 3 or 4 guys in in Brisbane. So I think the level is there. There's guys that are competitive at a world level, that are strong and they're effective, but the depth and number of guys is not as large. Whereas like if you go to some other places of the world, there's 15 guys in one gym and not 3 guys in all of Brisbane. You know what I mean? So I think it's more just the depth, honestly. Like I think there's a few guys, like a handful of guys that can like really be successful like internationally. I'm in Australia, but you know, if you go to the US or Brazil or whatever, there's 50, Hundreds. 60 guys that could be.
That's really interesting. For me, like I'm fascinated with how your ears are in such great condition, considering you got to black belt, you played rugby.
That's what everybody says, man.
What's your ear secret, brother?
I mean, I don't let people hold my head. That's what I do. Just keep them away. This is a sacred space, man. Don't
framing.
Yeah, that's it. I don't know. I think it's also like a genetic thing. I don't really have much. Actually, the only cauliflower that I've got has been from collision stuff from rugby. So I think it's a lucky thing. It's my game style. I like to move a lot, so I don't let people hold me very much. And I think it's also like a little bit of a genetic thing. Others don't.
Awesome. That's great.
And can you tell us about bjj101.com.au? Because if you put your name into YouTube, that's what comes up.
That's what comes up. Yeah. So I don't know. I always had conversations with people, and Eduardo, who's the owner of GARRA Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Brisbane and their locations and stuff. So when I always had like an issue with finances, gone competing, I still don't have any like major sponsors. I finance mainly everything myself. He sponsors me for some travel and that type of stuff as well. And then COVID hit as well. And with COVID and stuff, like it was difficult trying to I'm not working, I'm not doing anything. So we just came up with an idea of like creating a library just for the students initially. To help them with learning while they can't train either. Maybe they can watch some videos and tutorials and that type of thing. So I just, proposed the idea with him, and we started to kind of build this library for the students. And then we're like, well, maybe it can be for everybody. So we just kind of offered like a online kind of platform for tutorials and podcasts and all that type of thing, just for people to kind of like get the most out of their learning for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So
that's awesome.
That was the idea behind it.
Yeah, it's got a lot of detail. You're very very good with the detail of explanations. That's what I say from what I've watched.
I try to be as detailed as I can in some shorter form videos, so it's not like too difficult for people to kind of understand. So
great. And is the podcast yours as well?
Yeah. So me and Eduardo both sitting on the podcast and stuff. There's a bunch of the free stuff all on YouTube as well that people can access if they don't want to sign up to the kind of paid membership stuff. They just have a little bit more access to a bunch more positions and all that type of thing.
Awesome, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's a good podcast, and it talks a lot about like mindset and like training and just how to get the most out of things.
Have you ever had?
And I really enjoy that stuff. It's always like, I think jiu-jitsu is a very unique kind of sport in how like vast the differences between like the style of how you compete and mindset between like athletes. And I've been lucky enough to travel a lot through jiu-jitsu and meet a lot of different cool people and stay at their houses, and they kind of like look after me and let me stay there and that type of thing. And it's really interesting just hearing everyone's point of view, and everyone that you talk to, they always have got at least one point that you can kind of like gain from, some thing that they're good at or some idea that they have that's helpful to some extent. So I think it's just good to talk with people and broaden your perspective in life in general. So
100%. I mean, that's what this podcast is about. We get people on, and even for me, like I've been doing it for 13 years, and people say stuff, I remember one guest said something about always try and breathe slower than your opponent. So that for me has stuck. So even now, like all these years later, I still always try and do that, because, and I'll say to people sometimes like, hey brother, like slow down your breathing. Like, why are you breathing like that? So you can always learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Actually, you mentioned breath work earlier, Anton, as well. Like, do you do like Wim Hof? Are you into that sort of, breath work?
I don't know if it's specific to Wim Hof. I just understand that like with the heart rate stuff, you can kind of like create your desired heart rate through your type of breathing. So like a lot of the time I'll just do a bunch of different like styles of breathing just to kind of like play with your heart rate. Sometimes I'll try and like slow it down a bunch and do bigger long breaths, and then other times I'll do like really short shallow breaths just to kind of like warm up, just to like get your heart doing different stuff, just awesome. Like you warm up your your legs or something like that, or your arms when you do physical movements. I guess you can warm up like your lungs and like your body getting used to certain different changes in heart rate, which are going to happen when you compete. So I try to do that when I
see. No one's ever said that, man. So there you go. No one's ever said warm up your, like set your body into different states to get it used to changing states while you're competing. Like
because you're trying to mimic that, in a competitive thing. There's going to be times where you're exploding, you're full, like you're going crazy. It's a flurry, you're going nuts, and then it kind of backs off a little bit, and you're both not engaging at 150%. So I think you have to get used to that. Otherwise, if you do that for the first time when you go and compete, a lot of the time you're spent, or you're like your body's not able to bring your heart rate back down and get back into like kind of like a balanced intensity to continue competing.
And what's next for you, Anton? What's up for 2023?
Honestly, like I'm just going to continue doing some similar stuff. I think I haven't been as like successful as I could be. Like I've won some competitions and won some titles and stuff, but
you're the player of the year with the AJP. That's like one of the biggest organizations in the world. Okay,
he's an Anton. What can I say? We operate at a high level, Kim. Okay,
yeah, exactly, man. We got high expectations. So I've lost a bunch of competitions this year that I probably shouldn't have, because of some, just personal issues and like just not being prepared when I should have, and that type of thing. So I just need to convert a little better. Like I always do competitively. I'm always competitive with anybody, even at a world level. But I've always had an issue with like playing the rules or being like more of a points kind of orientated individual. And I think like at the highest levels, like you can't, just the way and the style of my competition generally, you can't do that. Like I'm a little bit
more strategy, do you mean?
Yeah, I probably have to be a little bit more strategic, but then also just like like again incorporate that rugby kind of professionalism back into jiu-jitsu, because I think having a lot of success and doing all that stuff and just relying on talent alone and all that type of stuff, it's great, but it doesn't carry you into that like last upper echelon of competitors. So because I've had a lot of success doing the way I've already done, I haven't adjusted as much as I could have, and I think I need to do some more adjustments and again like incorporate some of that strength and conditioning professionalism. I also have a hard time finding like good bodies to train with. So like not many bigger guys, not many other competitive guys. Like I just train with the students pretty much before competitions, which is not that common for guys to do for high level competition. And I might have to look at going and training interstate or at least or overseas for a month or something if I go and compete. So that's probably the thing that I'm lacking the most. Is just like other high level training partners. I pretty much just train with the students, which there has some benefit. The benefit is like I can explore a lot and not really be under any threat, but it's not really that helpful for competitive, like getting ready for competition stuff. It is better for learning. It is easy for me to learn positions and kind of explore and figure out stuff and understand jiu-jitsu better, but it's difficult for continuing to improve all the time.
I'm in a coaching program at the moment, and the coach was talking about how your assets are always turning into your liabilities, and your liabilities are always turning into your assets. It kind of really strikes me that that's what's going on. Like for you, you've got all this talent and all this competitive experience, and then that starts to become your liability because you don't adjust, So really interesting to see that.
Yeah, because it becomes too simple, it becomes too easy if you're training with other people that are not doing the same thing, or they're not striving for the same thing, or they don't have the same skill level. You can do whatever you want. But I think this is like something that I think people should all understand. Like, it doesn't matter which, like, I always talk about it specific to jiu-jitsu, but it's just like an idea to life. Like, it's pretty much yin and yang, but like, it doesn't matter what you pick, doesn't matter what technique you pick, there's always a negative associated with whatever you choose, whether it's like, man, I'm super flexible because I do heaps of yoga or whatever, but then you won't have the same level of strength. Like, you can't maintain the same level of power and strength as somebody that just does powerlifting or whatever. And I think finding the middle ground or the balance is always the goal. And it's difficult. That's like the hardest thing to achieve in life in general, like whether it's work-life balance, whether it's whatever, it doesn't matter. But I find a common issue that a lot of people have is people always come and say, what's the best? What's the best? What's the best? And I always respond with like a silly answer. I'm like, oh, what's the best car? What's the best food? What's the best? It's subjective. Yeah. And it's the same thing with jiu-jitsu, and it's the same thing with training. It's the same thing with, like, you kind of talk about your coaching thing. It doesn't matter really what you pick. There's always going to be some negative associated with it, and there's always going to be some positive. And you just have to learn which things you're willing to accept, or which things you're going to be able to navigate through the best. And I think that's something that I really learned through jiu-jitsu.
Powerful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're nearly out of time. Anton, any final words? Any pearls of wisdom for our listeners? You've already given heaps.
Nothing specific. Like, man, just go and train. Like, talking doesn't change anything, man. Just go and train. Like, if you want to improve in anything, whether it's kickboxing and, you know, jiu-jitsu, whatever, you just have to put the time in on the mat and then actually think about it. Because a lot of people just turn up and they're like, I've been here for 12 months. Like, yeah, but do you remember what happened in the role you just did? Or can you remember what happened in the role you did last week? Like, you have to have some consciousness and awareness and presence when you're actually training, because just doing like physical output doesn't lead to anything really. It might lead to something over a long period of time, but if you're more specific and you actually focus in on things, you're going to maximize like your kind of output. So you're actually getting something back for what you're doing. And I think a lot of people waste that. They're not very efficient with how they do things.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. I can see why, like, you say you haven't had success competitively, but I disagree. Like, you've been very successful competitor, in my opinion. So I could see why, you know, that's obviously come about, because you're very wise in your thinking, very deep.
Cerebral.
Yes.
I mean, I think you have to be. I think you have to be to get to like high levels of anything. You got to be. That's why, like, you know, people that have success in anything, they always look for more information. You're always looking for more information and more understanding and improving. And it's like a, you know, never-ending pursuit. And that's the pathway to getting better, I think.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Well, my finishing note is our podcast is better because we've had 2 Antons on at a time, and you've never done it.
I'll have to get 2 on as well then.
Yeah.
You have to get 3 on. You have to find 3 Antons now.
Try.
Oh, jeez, I'm just a third wheel here. Sorry, guys.
We need 3 Antons and 3 Kims at one go.
Oh my God, that's madness. All right, well, we'll have this out, Anton, probably in the new year. We've got a couple of weeks backed up, but yeah, if you could share it on your network, on your social media, that would be awesome for us and help us grow our audience, because I guess we're
if you tag me or whatever, if you have any Facebook stuff or any stuff, I will definitely share it for sure.
100%. Yeah, we're on all the platforms, so yeah, we will do that. And thank you so much for giving up your time. I know you're very busy. Very busy, awesome, man. And
no problem. I appreciate it. No, it's always fun to have a chat.
Yeah, awesome. We look forward to seeing you tearing up the competition circuit in 2023.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Excellent.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much, guys.
Brother.
Thank you. Bye.
Bliss.